Hi there, today we're making this wire work adjustable ring, and if you want to see more techniques and tutorials like this one, hit that subscribe button. Now let's get wire wrapping. You can vary the look of this ring by the size, shape and colour of bead you use, or even making it without a bead. And the materials you need are 1.5mm diameter copper wire, which is about 15 gauge, 0.4mm diameter copper wire, which is 26 gauge, and a bead. A flat or puffy bead is best. And mine is about 5 by 7mm. And the tools you need are flat nose pliers, bail making pliers, wire cutters, a torch and tweezers, ring mandrel, rawhide mallet, file and polishing tools. I'm going to shape this ring to around about a standard size N or O. So I'm starting with 16 centimetres of the 1.5mm wire, which is about 6 1/4 inches. And I'm going to bend it in half using my bail making pliers to keep a nice round shape in the middle. I've just estimated the centre, but I want those ends to be level, so I'll make the adjustments until they are. And then I'll continue to cross those wires over to make a teardrop shape. Now I want to bend the ends back again, as eventually they'll be parallel. And then I can finesse that teardrop shape. Make sure I've got gentle pleasing curves. And make sure that the bead fits into it with a little bit of space to accommodate the weave. Once I've got that teardrop shape right, I'll adjust the ends so they're sitting parallel and touching. Now they're still not quite level, so I'll just nip off that very end. And make sure that they're touching right at the end. This is because the next stage is to fuse them together. So I'll light my torch, and then holding the wire in my tweezers, I'm going to heat the end. If you have a larger torch that gives out more heat, that's definitely worth using. But I wanted to prove that it's possible, even for a small handheld torch, to fuse wire of this thickness. It does just take a little bit of time. Some people have success holding the wire and torch in this manner, but I don't think the ends are getting quite hot enough, so I think I'll switch to an upright position. The main problem is that the copper will conduct heat away really easily, so I find having it upright just helps keep that extra bit of heat as it rises anyway. That is now glowing a bit brighter, and hopefully you can now see it's just beginning to ball up. With this size wire, you've got a fair amount of control, as it doesn't tend to ball very quickly. Just make sure I'm happy with the shape. I will cut down the torch time in this video a little bit, but all told it took about 4 minutes. And then of course quench the wire to cool it down. And you can clean it in pickle if you want. Now you can just use your file to take off any last remaining burrs of wire that might be sticking out of that ball. And smooth and round that ball to the shape you want. Because it's been heated, the wire is now also really soft, so you can finesse that teardrop shape a little bit more if you want to. And that gives us our basic frame shape. Because the wire is so soft, we can shape it around the mandrel with our fingers. And I tend to start at a larger size on the mandrel than where I want to finish, and just bend the frame around. At this point we need to decide which side of the teardrop that end's going to sit, and I think I'll go above it. So I'll just bend the wires so they'll sit on top of that teardrop. And then I can move up the mandrel to make that ring a little bit smaller. And I want those ends to sit apart a little bit more. And then I'll check the shape of the ring. Got a bit of a bend in it there, so I'll straighten that out. And then I'll use my mallet to make sure that the shape's perfectly round and start work hardening the ring. Because it's adjustable, you want it to be a little bit malleable, but not so that it bends out of shape too easily. And then I'm going to polish this in my usual way. And if you want more details on polishing, I've got a video on that I'll pop in a card above and in the description below. But I tend to start with these silicone burrs, then use the radial discs to get into the tighter spaces, and finish with a buff and rouge for that lovely high shine. And once the excess rouge is cleaned off, that's our frame ready to start weaving. So we're ready to start weaving that teardrop shape. I'm not sure how much wire it'll use, so I've got about 1.5 metres or 6 feet of the 0.4mm 26 gauge wire. The actual amount of wire that you need will depend on the size and shape that you've made your particular teardrop and how close you want to make your weave. Now I need to secure the wire with 2 wraps, but I want the start of the wrap to look even on both sides of the frame. So I'll start with those 2 wraps so my working tail of wire is heading downwards towards the parallel part of the wires, which is right as we're looking at it at the moment. And then when I take the wire down and across to that top wire, I'll put 2 wraps on, working back to the left, which will sit in parallel to those first 2 wraps. And that gives us our even end to the wrapping. Then we can trim the tail of wire. I'll then take the weaving wire across and wrap that bottom frame wire twice again. And do be careful with the wire as you go to try to stop it getting any kinks in it. And I'll continue wrapping 2 times on both wires until that space opens up a little bit. Which for me is 3 times each side. And then I'm going to increase to 3 wraps on each side. Now this is the basic corset weave, and if you're unfamiliar with it and want to know a bit more, I've got a video that goes into more detail. I'll pop that in a card above and in the description below. Now I've made 3 wraps on both wires twice each. And because that frame's gradually getting further apart, if I continue with 3 wraps, the angle of the wire as it moves across will get smaller and it makes the weave look closer. For this design I want to keep that angle about the same, and you can achieve that by increasing the wraps on each side. It isn't an exact science, so I'm just increasing it as I feel makes the weave look right to me. Starting with increasing to 4 wraps on each side. So if we skip ahead a little bit and look at the picture, you should be able to see those cross wires are all at a very similar angle, which is what I'm looking for. And after 3 wraps on each side, I increase to 4, then 5 wraps, then 5 again, and then 6. But that is specific to this particular teardrop, and it is better if you feel your way through what's right for your particular shape. So we've woven up to the point where we're ready to add the bead. I've finished the wraps on the top wire, and I'm ready to come back down to wrap the bottom wire. So I'll thread on the bead and then take that weaving wire across to the bottom. The bead will be sitting on top of a couple of those wires, so don't worry too much about its positioning just yet. But make sure it's going across and the wraps are sitting next to the previous wraps. And then we're just going to continue the weave, wrapping, in my case, 6 wraps on that bottom wire, and then taking the weaving wire across to the top. At this point, the bead should be sitting fairly well in its final position. And I'm just going to continue the weave as far as I can up to the end. And for this ring, that's another 6 wraps on the top, 5 wraps on the bottom, 5 wraps on the top, and then 3 wraps on the bottom. Now the weave is just about at the end of that teardrop. I'm not going to be able to fit any more in, so I'm just going to finish off by wrapping around that curve. And I'll fit in as many wraps as I can just to keep it nice and tight. You might want to just space those wraps out a little bit. Then you can trim off the excess wire. Make sure that end's tucked in and there's nothing to catch on your finger. And the ring's finished. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, hit that like button below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and head over to my website for more hints, tips and projects. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.